While we remain largely unable to cure patients with advanced metastatic cancers, we have made very rapid progress in our ability to prolong life expectancy and alleviate suffering of these patients. And I expect that we will continue to make rapid progress as long as we keep on investing in research. And so this video will describe some of the things that I think that will change in the not too distant future. My name is Dr. David Stewart. I'm a medical oncologist in Ottawa, Canada, and a professor of medicine at the University of Ottawa. And I recently wrote a book called A Short Primer on Why Cancer Still Sucks, intended for patients, that can be purchased online through Amazon Books. So this is the 16th out of 16 planned videos on things that people often ask me about cancer. So I'm just presenting my opinions here. And further details can be obtained from my book. Importantly, for your own healthcare, rely on your healthcare providers for guidance. Since my early teens, my favorite poem has been Say Not, the Struggle Not Availeth by Arthur Hugh Clowes. To me, it's our battle cry in our fight against cancer. In this battle, science leads the way. So some people are skeptical about science, but science is very, very important in this. In 1976, when I began my oncology training at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas, the head of our department there had, Emil J. Freireich, had something called Freireich's laws. And one of Freireich's laws was that the only people who come close to predicting the future are the science fiction writers, and they always underpredict rather than overpredicting. If we can imagine it, then it can be done. At the time that he told us this, none of us thought that we would soon be walking around with phones in our pocket, or that we would no longer need a map because a computer in our car would be talking to a satellite. That was science fiction. Yet many of the things that we now take for granted were first visualized by science fiction writers. Again, if we can imagine it, it can potentially be done. With respect to things coming in the field of oncology, my first prediction is that in the not too distant future, we will reach a tipping point in regulation of clinical research. Regulation is absolutely essential, but the way it's set up currently is far too inefficient. And so it slows down development of effective new drugs and also greatly increases the cost of developing those drugs. And those costs directly contribute to the very high prices that we currently pay for drugs. The current issues with clinical research regulation are not due to the regulators. They are just doing what is asked from them. The current problem is with the elected politicians who direct the regulators in what they should do. Those politicians are far too risk averse and also too into scapegoating. And so we need this to change if we are to make progress in making our regulatory systems much more efficient and much less costly. If the potential to save lives and to slash drug prices, drug costs, so slashing drug development costs, does not convince the politicians, then maybe some other economic realities will. Until very recently, when I went to international scientific meetings, most of the new drugs that were discussed had been developed by American or European drug companies. However, over the past 2 to 3 years, there's been an explosion of new drugs developed by our Chinese colleagues. These new drugs from China could be a marked benefit to all of us. But the American and European drug companies are going to start really pressing for changes in the way clinical research regulation is done so that they can keep on competing in this to keep on developing effective new drugs. This will require massive regulatory changes. So these regulatory changes, they're very feasible. There are lots of things that we can do as outlined in my book and as outlined in earlier videos. So these can be done without jeopardizing patient safety, patient rights, or data integrity. We just need to do them. And we know we can do them because we already did them with development of COVID vaccines and with development of AIDS treatments. The experience there told us that if we just put our mind to it, we can do things much faster and at far lower costs. I also see a change in the way that cancer care is delivered. So that the number of cancer patients is increasing rapidly as the population grows and ages. But also patients with cancer are living far longer and receiving far more treatment. So there are not enough oncologists to keep on dealing with this explosion in number of cancer patients under treatment. So we'll need to rethink how this cancer care is delivered. While there are no effective prevention strategies on the horizon, I think that in the future there will be. New gene therapies to tackle things like the BRCA mutations that increase the risk of cancer. These gene therapies could help reduce the risk of somebody developing cancer. In addition, there could be approaches called synthetic lethality approaches where new drugs will specifically target cells that have the mutation that increase the risk of developing cancer. In addition, new therapies that target senescent cells may be important. Senescent cells are ones that have damaged DNA but are still surviving and sitting there. So ordinarily they're not dividing, but they can regain their ability to divide. And if they do, they will pass on a damaged genetic material to daughter cells and increase the risk of cancer. So in the future, there will be new approaches to eradicate senescent cells. Within 5 to 20 years, I think we will have effective new blood tests to detect cancers when they're very small, so that they can be cured because they've been detected when they're very small and have not yet spread. By 5 to 15 years from now, I do not think we will still be giving adjuvant treatments. Adjuvant treatments are chemotherapy and immunotherapy and drugs like that. They're given after surgery to try to eradicate small micrometastases. They're too small to be seen, but they will eventually grow and lead to advanced incurable metastatic cancer. By about 5 to 15 or 20 years from now, I think instead that patients will undergo surgery or radiotherapy, and then we'll have a blood test done to see whether there's still any circulating tumor cell DNA. If there is, that means that there are small tumor deposits that are too small to show up on scans that are present, but will eventually grow. And so then therapy will be given to those patients to eradicate minimal residual disease. Whereas if no circulating tumor DNA is found, that increases the probability that there are no surviving cancer cells left in the body. And so those patients will just be observed carefully instead of receiving these postoperative or post-radiotherapy adjuvant treatments. Provided we continue to invest in them, there will be an explosion of new therapies, new targeted therapies, new immunotherapies, new synthetic lethality drugs that just preferentially target cancer cells. There will also be new vaccines against cancer and more antibody-drug conjugates as well. Not only will there be new drugs, but there will be new ways of manufacturing them. So if it's found that through advanced genetic testing that a given individual needs a very, very specific kind of drug, then instead of relying on a factory to make it, there will be methods that will be set up that can permit the immediate synthesis of drugs that are unique to individual patients. While that sounds like science fiction, all of the component parts to do it are currently exist. We just have to figure out a way to make it happen. For example, in an earlier video, I talk about bispecific T-cell engagers. These are antibodies where one arm of the antibody attaches to an immune cell, a T cell, and the other attaches to a tumor cell. In the future, I envision that we'll have these monoclonal antibodies where the one arm that attaches to the T cell is already there, and on the other arm, it will be unspecified, but we'll then just manufacture a hook that is very specific for an individual patient's cancer and attach that hook to that monoclonal, that bispecific T cell engager to permit that drug to very specifically attack that patient's cancer. And then as the cancer changes over time, then that hook that is attached to that bispecific T cell engager will also be changed so that the drug, that monoclonal antibody, will keep on being able to attack that individual patient's tumor cells. Technologies like this may rapidly replace more toxic therapies like CAR T cells, although even CAR T cells and similar cellular therapies, rapid advances in the future are going to make these far more effective and far more feasible than they currently are. In addition, we are going to become much more effective at creating cancer vaccines. In tackling COVID, mRNA vaccines became very prominent. But these mRNA vaccines also have the potential to be able to take the individual antigens or changes in an individual patient's cells and convert them into a vaccine. There are already very early studies suggesting that these personalized mRNA vaccines may possibly have promise for the future against advanced cancers. We will also become better at reversing epigenetic changes. Epigenetic changes are things that turn genes on or off that should not be turned on or off. For example, something called tumor suppressor genes usually will limit growth of cells. But if they are turned off by epigenetic changes, then the cell may become chronically turned on. And chronically dividing. So we'll find new ways of turning those tumor suppressor genes back on so that it will control growth of cells. In addition, I expect that we'll gain new knowledge on how the cells that drive tumors, so-called tumor stem cells, how they differ from the normal stem cells that are important for maintaining normal organs and tissues. And once we understand better how the stem cells differ, we may be able to attack their vulnerabilities so that we can very specifically suppress tumor stem cells without suppressing normal stem cells. If we can do that, that can have a huge impact against a wide range of malignancies. I expect that by 10 to 30 years from now, that babies, when they're born, will undergo genotyping, so that we'll know all the genes that are expressed in that baby, including the metabolism genes and other genes that make certain drugs work or not work in individuals, make certain drugs toxic or not toxic in single individuals. So then, instead of just taking a standard drug off the shelf that's used in everybody, the drugs will be selected for individuals based on their individual genotyping. This will make the therapies both more effective and less toxic in individuals. So this will be extending personalized therapy, so it will no longer just be with cancers, but instead there will be personalized therapies for everything, because we will be selecting drugs that are uniquely useful in individuals based on their underlying genetic makeup. In the future, we will also analyze clinical research data in different ways. We'll be making more use of what's called Bayesian statistics, and also population survival kinetics, to get additional information, better information, more useful information from the clinical trials that we conduct. Overall, I think that we'll continue to make rapid progress as long as we keep on investing in research. I anticipate that our actual progress will far outshine the very timid projections that I've made in this video. The biggest and most important thing, again, is to keep on investing in research. And the biggest threat to that is the current very high cost and rapidly escalating cost of new therapies. If we reach the point that governments and insurance companies and individuals will no longer buy those therapies because they're too expensive, then if companies cannot sell their new therapies, they will stop investing in new therapies, and that will bring research to a halt. Unequivocally, we are making rapid progress, but we face a lot of obstacles. But it's important to understand that progress, just one small observation in one area, may have profound implications in other areas. And the last verse of my favorite poem, Say Not, the Struggle Not Availeth, sort of epitomizes that, sort of outlines it. That last verse says, "And not by eastern windows only, when daylight comes in the light. In front the sun climbs slow, how slowly, but westward look, the land is bright." Things that seem to be a small advance in one area can have major implications in other areas. On this and other aspects of cancer, again, you can get further details from my book, A Short Primer on Why Cancer Still Sucks, that can be purchased online through Amazon Books. I hope that you have found this video useful. Thank you.